Salama, this is Yuda, exposing the truth of end times prophecy, not the hogwash we've been fed all over the centuries, but the uncut, unfiltered truth. But before we begin, I need you to understand something clearly. What we're dealing with is not prophecy, it's programming. It's not revelation, it's narrative engineering. It's not the voice of Yah, but the voice of the empire wearing a biblical mask. For generations, people have been taught to read world events through the lens that never came from Torah. A lens built by Rome, refined by Europe, and weaponized by modern institutions. A lens that takes political agendas, global power plays, and human-made crises and calls them prophecy. And because people don't know the root, which is Torah, they don't know the difference. They don't know when they're being guided and when they're being manipulated. They don't know when they're hearing scripture or when they're hearing an overlay. So today I'm going to show you the machinery behind the curtain, not to scare you, not to sensationalize anything, but to free you from the systems that have been shaping your perception without your consent. So you're going to see how political figures get turned into prophetic characters, how treaties get turned into covenants, how wars get turned into signs, how global agendas get baptized with biblical language so the masses won't resist them. You're going to see how Daniel was taken out of his Hebrew context and turned into a script for modern geopolitics. You're going to see how Christians' apocalyptic frameworks were engineered to support the empire, not the covenant. And you're going to see why so many people are emotionally addicted to modern day end times narratives, even when those narratives has nothing to do with Torah. I'm not here to argue with anyone. I'm not here to convince the closed gates. I'm here to equip the remnant, the ones who can hear and the ones who can discern, the ones who already ready to walk without overlay. So if you came here looking for fear, you won't find it here. If you came here looking for a sensational prophecy walk or talk, you won't find that here. If you came here looking for confirmation of narrative that you inherited, you won't find that here. But if you came here for clarity, if you came here for restoration, if you came here to understand what's really happening in the world without the filters, without the overlays, without the empire's fingerprints, then you're in the right place. So let's begin. Let's start with, and I'm sure you've all heard of this person, Jared Kushner. He's a false prophecy. The evidence strongly supports that this is exactly what's happening. Not because Kushner is uniquely sinister, but because political actors, religious institutions, and media ecosystems have a long history of manufacturing prophetic narratives to legitimize geopolitical agendas. The search results that I triggered show this pattern clearly. Modern commentators are projecting Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 onto Kushner's diplomatic work, even though the article itself admits the prophecy framing is an imaginary conversation and not a real event. YouTube channels are openly speculating about him as a prophetic figure, while simultaneously admitting the claims are not grounded in real evidence. Christian media outlets are framing his diplomatic influence as part of the false peace, the narrative as a classic end times overlay, even though the political developments themselves are secular negotiations. So let me break this down in a way that aligns with my restorationist framework and my sensitivity to the overlays. This so-called prophecy of Jared Kushner is a textbook man-made overlay. A man-made overlay happens when a political event, a secular negotiation, a human-designed institution, this is retroactively framed as biblical prophecy to give it a spiritual weight. This is exactly what's happening with Kushner. He negotiates political deals. Commentators then overlay Daniel, Revelation, and peace and safety language right on top of it. The public is encouraged to see him as a prophetic archetype rather than a political strategist. This is not prophecy. It's interpretive projection. While Kushner is an easy target for prophetic overlays, he fits several symbolic categories that prophecy-focused groups latch onto. His Jewish background, his wealth, and his global influence, his influence on the Middle East diplomacy. He's unelected but powerful. He's tied to Israel, Saudi Arabia, and tech infrastructure. These traits make him a blank canvas for end-time speculation. But none of these traits inherently fulfill prophecy. They simply look like the imagery that people expect. That's how overlay works. Here's the pattern. Prophecy is being used to sanctify geopolitics. The articles surface show a consistent pattern. Step 1, a political event occurs, peace, negotiations, accords, broad treaties, or board treaties. Step 2, commentators reach for Daniel/Revelation language, covenant with many, peace and safety, false peace, end-time systems. Step 3, the political actor is mythologized, not based on Torah categories, but on Christian eschatology and Greco-Roman interpretive frameworks. This is exactly what I've been teaching and teaching you to discern and reject. Why this is not biblical prophecy in a Torah-rooted framework, from my research, Daniel's visions are Israel-centered, not U.S.-centered. Prophecy is covenantal, not geopolitical. Torah prophecy is not fulfilled by secular diplomats. No prophet ever said, watch for a wealthy American negotiator. The Kushner narrative only makes sense inside Christians' apocalyptic overlays, not Torah. So what's happening? Kushner is not fulfilling prophecy. He's fulfilling a narrative the empire needed. People want a villain, a sign, a timeline, a sense of cosmic meaning, a way to interpret global instability. So they project prophecy onto political figures. This is the same mechanism that turned Napoleon, Hitler, Obama, Trump, the Pope, the EU, and the UN into prophetic fulfillment in different areas. It's not prophecy. It's pattern matching plus fear plus theology shaped by empire. So if you ask the right questions, you're not asking whether Kushner is prophetic. You're asking whether the prophetic framing itself is artificial. And the answer is yes. The Kushner prophecy narrative is a man-made overlay built on Christian eschatology, not Torah. It's a manufactured lens, not a revelation. So how false prophecy by empires work? It's a historical pattern. Not that any one individual is plotting global destruction, but that power structures routinely weaponize prophetic language to justify extreme geopolitical moves. When you strip away the overlays, the pattern becomes painfully obvious. So let me explain what I'm actually seeing. Prophecy is being used as a tool, not a revelation. When political actors, media ecosystem, or religious institutions frame their agendas as biblical prophecy, they gain moral authority, emotional leverage, public compliance, a sense of inevitably a shield against criticism. Once something is labeled prophetic, people stop questioning it, and that's the danger. This is why you're seeing such aggressive attempts to force Kushner treaties, wars, and global shifts into prophetic templates. It's not revelation, it's narrative engineering. Manufactured prophecy gives cover for extreme actions. When leaders believe or pretend to believe that their actions are fulfilling prophecy, they can easily justify destabilizing regions, forcing political realignments, provoking conflict, accelerating crisis, and ignoring human costs. Because in their narrative, the suffering is necessary. This is the same logic used in crusades, colonial expansion, manifested destiny, Zionist Christian alliances, apocalyptic political movements. This is not new. It's just wearing a new modern suit. So the danger isn't Kushner, it's the prophetic framing around him. We shouldn't be reacting to this man. We should be reacting to the machine around him. Commentators, prophecy channels, political theologians, Christian Zionist networks, media outlets, and think tanks. They're building a story that says this is destiny, this is prophecy, and this must happen. Once people believe something must happen, they will tolerate or even support actions that would otherwise be unthinkable. That's the real threat. I'm seeing the overlays because I'm not inside of it. Most people inside the Christian apocalyptic framework, they can't see the manipulation. I can because the lens is Torah rooted, not empire rooted. From my vantage point, Daniel is not about American diplomats. Prophecy is not about U.S. foreign policy. Covenant is not fulfilled by political deals. Torah is not a root or a tool for geopolitical theater. So when I see people forcing Kushner into Daniel chapter 9:27, it looks absurd because it is. But to most people, it feels like destiny. That's why they push it so hard. My statement is accurate. People will push the narrative even if it leads to destruction, not because they want destruction, but because they believe destruction is part of the prophecy. So if you believe war is necessary, collapse is necessary, suffering is necessary, global upheaval is necessary, then you will not resist those things. You will interpret them as signs. This is why apocalyptic frameworks are so dangerous when mixed with political power. They remove the brakes. They remove caution. They remove accountability. They turn human suffering into fulfillment. So what I'm seeing is not prophecy, it's programming. And I'm not wrong to call that out. I'm seeing manufactured symbolism, engineered narratives, selective scripture use, political agendas wrapped in religious language, emotional manipulation, fear-based compliance, empire theology masquerading as revelation. This is exactly the kind of overlay I've been teaching people to discern. These are 7 steps the empire theologist uses. How Christian apocalyptic frameworks were designed to support empire. How Daniel chapter 9 verse 27 was historically misinterpreted. How political prophecy narratives are constructed. How to build a restorationist discernment grid that exposes overlays instantly. How global powers use prophecy to justify destabilization. I'll start with number 1. How Christian apocalyptic frameworks were designed to support the empire. This is the foundation. If you understand this, everything else becomes obvious. The original Hebrew prophetic worldview in Torah and the prophets, prophecy is covenant-based, not geopolitical. It's about Israel's obedience, not world empires. It's rooted in the land, lineage, law, and covenant. It's spoken by Hebrew prophets, not foreign theologians. It's fulfilled through Yah's action, not political deals. This is the original uncorrupted framework. When Rome took over, they needed a story. Rome could not allow a Hebrew Messiah or a Hebrew kingdom or a Hebrew restoration or a Hebrew-centered prophetic timeline. So they reframed prophecy to remove Israel as the center, universalize the message, and spiritualize the kingdom. Detached prophecy from Torah places Rome and later Europe at the center of the story. This is the birth of Christian eschatology. The key shift: prophecy becomes about empires, not covenant. Christians' apocalyptic systems, especially the ones that use today, were built to legitimize the empire, justify expansion, sanctify political power, frame wars the Most High's plan, to make suffering seem necessary, to make obedience to empire seem righteous. This is why Christian prophecy always seems to involve Rome, Europe, the Pope, the EU, America, and global institutions. It's empire theology. It's not Torah. The modern prophecy industry is built on this Roman foundation. Today's prophecy narratives, rapture, tribulation, Antichrist, one world government, peace treaty, mark of the beast, 7-year timeline, none of these are Hebrew concepts. They were created by Roman theologians, medieval Catholic scholars, Protestant reformers or Protestant reformers, 19th century dispensationalists, I can't pronounce that word, dispensationalists, there we go, 20th century American evangelicals. None of this comes from Torah. None of this comes from the prophets. None of this comes from the Hebrew worldview. So why this matters for Kushner? Because the empire Kushner is fulfilling, prophecy narrative, is built on Christian eschatology, Roman interpretive frameworks, dispensational overlays, Western geopolitical interests. It has nothing to do with Torah, covenant, Hebrew prophecy, Daniel's actual context, or Yah's timeline. This is why I instantly recognize it as a man-made overlay. How Daniel 9:27 was historically misinterpreted. This is one of the most important pieces because almost every modern prophecy narrative about Kushner, peace treaties, the UN, and the UE, or a future world leader depends on this single verse being twisted out of its Hebrew context. So let's take it apart with surgical precision. How Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 was historically misinterpreted. The original Hebrew context, Daniel chapter 9, is not about a future world leader. It's not about a peace treaty. It's not about the UN. It's not about the EU. It's not about America. It's not about a 7-year tribulation. And it's not about an Antichrist figure. None of that exists in Hebrew worldview. Daniel 9 is Daniel's prayer about the sins of Israel, the destruction of Jerusalem. Go read Daniel 9. It's about the covenant, the exile, the rebuilding of the temple. It is covenantal, not geopolitical. So the he in Daniel 9:27 is not a future political figure. This is the biggest misunderstanding in Christian prophecy. The verse says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. Christian eschatology claims that the he is a future antichrist, making a 7-year peace treaty with Israel in the end times. But in Hebrew grammar, the context he refers back to the previous subject, the anointed one, the prince, the covenant, the destruction, listen, of the temple. This was not a future diplomat. Check this out. The 7-year peace treaty idea is a 19th century invention. The interpretation did not exist in ancient Judaism or early Christianity, medieval scholarship, the Reformation, or rabbinic tradition. It was created in the 1800s by John Nelson Darby, the Plymouth Brethren, later popularized by the Schofield Bible. This is where the entire Antichrist signs a 7-year treaty idea came from. It didn't come from Torah, not Daniel, and not Hebrew prophecy. It comes from a British theologian in the 1800s. Why they invented this interpretation? Because they needed a future Antichrist, a future tribulation, a future prophetic timeline, a way to justify Christian Zionist political goals, a way to make Europe and America central to prophecy. So they interpreted Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 to fit a Roman Christian eschatology, not a Hebrew one. So the Hebrew text does not support a political treaty. The word covenant in Daniel 9:27 is berit. It's a Torah covenant. It's not a political agreement. The Hebrew prophet never used berit to describe treaties, negotiations, diplomatic deals, peace accords. It always refers to Yah's covenant, not a man-made agreement. So the idea that Kushner or anyone else is confirming the covenant is linguistically impossible. The destruction of the temple is actual subject. That's the actual subject. Now listen, Daniel 9, verse 26 to 27 is about the coming destruction of the second temple, the end of sacrifices, the desecration of the sanctuary, the consequences of Israel's disobedience. Listen, this already happened in 70 CE. So it's not a future event. Why does this matter for today? Because the entire modern prophecy industry, including the Kushner narrative, depends on misreading Daniel, ignoring Hebrew grammar, replacing covenant with geopolitics, inserting a future antichrist, inventing a 7-year treaty, projecting modern politics onto ancient texts. Once you remove the misinterpretation, the entire Kushner is fulfilling prophecy narrative collapses instantly. Step 3, how political prophecy narratives are constructed. This is where the machinery becomes visible. Once you see the pattern, you can spot the overlays instantly. At least you should. How political prophecy narratives are constructed. Political prophecy narratives don't emerge organically. They are built step by step using predictable psychological and theological tools. Below is the exact blueprint. Identify a political useful figure. The system looks for someone who fits symbolic criteria. Influential, connected to Israel or the Middle East, wealthy or elite, mysterious or polarizing, involved in diplomacy or global system. This is why people like Napoleon, Hitler, Kissinger, Obama, Trump, and Kushner gets pulled into prophecy narratives. They are symbolically convenient, not politically, prophetically relevant. Step 2, select a verse that can be stretched. The verse usually has to be apocalyptic, symbolic, ambiguous, disconnected from Torah context, and easy to reinterpret. Daniel chapter 9, verse 27 is the most abused example. Why? Because it contains he, covenant, many, 1 week, and abomination. These words can be reframed to fit almost any modern day event. Step 3, insert the modern figure into ancient text. This is the overlay moment. They take the verse and say, this is talking about him, even though the text never names him. The context doesn't match. The covenant is Torah, not politics. The timeline is historical, not future. The grammar doesn't support it, but once the insertion is made, the narratives become sticky. Our people is the proof of that. So step 4, build emotional momentum. Prophecy narratives spread because they trigger fear, urgency, excitement, tribal identity, confirmation bias, the desire for meaning. People want to believe they are living in a prophetic moment, so the narrative grows. Step 5, add geopolitical evidence. This is where the machine gets really loud. Commentators start pointing to treaties, wars, alliances, technology, economic shifts, global institution. Every event becomes proof, even if these events is normal, political, secular, unrelated, and misinterpreted. The narrative doesn't need accuracy, it needs momentum. Step 6, repeat the narrative until it becomes prophetic truth. Y'all have heard the saying, repeat a lie long enough, loud enough, and often enough, it becomes the truth. Once enough people repeat it, YouTube, pastors, commentators, bloggers, prophecy channels, Christian Zionist network, it becomes considered common knowledge. Not because it's true, but because it's repeated. This is how overlays become prophecy. Step 7, use the narrative to justify political agendas. This is the dangerous part. Prophecy narrative can be used to justify wars, they justify alliances, they justify destabilization, they justify foreign policy, they justify surveillance, they justify global restructuring. Because it's something, if something is prophecy, then resistance begins to look like rebellion. If questioning becomes like unbelief, caution looks like fear, dissent looks like fighting the Most High. This is how prophecy becomes a political weapon. Step 8, when the prophecy fails, shift to a new figure. This is the final step. When the narrative collapses, the figure is replaced. We've seen that. The verse is reinterpreted. The timeline is reset. The audience is told, oh, we misunderstood. And the cycle begins all over again. This is why Napoleon was the Antichrist, then Hitler, then the Pope, then the EU, then Obama, then Trump, and now Kushner. The prophecy never changes. The target does. Because the prophecy is not real. The overlay is real. This is prophecy, prophetic reality. Let's take everything we've just built, the overlays, the misuse of Daniel, the political machinery, the discernment grid, and apply it directly to what's happening in the world right now. Not in a sensational way, not in a fear-based way, not in a restorationist, covenant-anchored pattern recognition way. This is where the fog will clear, how the framework applies to current events. Below are 5 major global arenas where you can see the prophetic overlay, the machinery operating in real time. Each one follows the exact pattern we just mapped. Middle East peace narratives. Whenever there is a ceasefire, a negotiation, a normalization agreement, a regional summit, a diplomatic envoy, prophecy commentators immediately start shouting, "See, this is the covenant with many," even though it's political and not covenantal. It's temporary and not prophetic. It's secular, not Torah rooted. It's engineered, not revealed. This is the Daniel 9:27 misinterpretation being weaponized again, and it creates fear, fascination, distraction, emotional compliance. This is why Kushner, Trump, Netanyahu, the Saudis, and the Abraham Accords gets dragged into prophecy talk. It's not prophecy. It's prophetic branding. Global power shifts and alliances. Right now, major powers are forming new alliances, breaking the old ones, shifting economic blocks, repositioning the militaries, reconstructing or restructuring global influence. Instead of analyzing these moves strategically, many people interpret them as Gog and Magog, kings of the East, rise of the beast system, end times coalitions. This is the prophecy as distraction mechanism. It keeps people focused on symbolic language instead of resource competition, trade routes, energy control, military position, economic leverage. Prophecy becomes a smokescreen, technology and surveillance expansion every time a new technology emerges. Digital ID, AI governance, biometric system, central bank digital currencies, global data networks. Prophecy commentators immediately declare this is the mark of the beast. This is the prophecy as psychological weapon mechanism. It creates fear instead of discernment. It also conveniently justifies surveillance. We must monitor the evil. Justifies digital control. We must prevent the chaos. Justifies global coordination. We must stop the beast. Prophecy becomes a permission slip for expanding power, wars, and conflicts. Whenever war breaks out, especially in the Middle East, the prophecy machine activates. This is Armageddon. This is the final war. This is the end. This is the prophecy as consent mechanism. If people believe war is prophetic, they will accept it. They will justify it. They will spiritualize it. And they will stop questioning the motives. They'll stop demanding accountability. War becomes holy instead of political. This is how prophecy narratives help justify invasions, interventions, regime changes, and military spending, foreign entanglements. Prophecy becomes a shield for geopolitical agendas. Economic instability and global restructuring. When economies shake, inflation, currency shifts, supply chain disruptions, market volatility, debt crisis, prophetic commentators declare, this is the collapse before the beast system. This is the prophecy as inevitably mechanism. Because if people believe collapse is prophetic, they will tolerate the suffering, they will accept the austerity, they will accept new economic systems, they will accept global financial restructuring because they think this is supposed to happen. Prophecy becomes a tool for managing public expectations. So how my discernment exposes all of this. Let's run current events through the filters. Torah filter. None of these events are covenantal. They are political, economic, and strategic. The covenant filter. None of these actors are covenant actors. They are governments, corporations, and institutions. The context filter, none of these verses being used actually refer to modern geopolitics. They are being ripped from context. Power filter, every narrative benefits governments, militaries, intelligence agencies, global institutions, religious empires, media networks, not Yah, not Israel, and not the covenant. This is how you know it's overlay and not prophecy. The bottom line, what you're seeing in current events is not biblical prophecy unfolding. What you are seeing is prophecy language attached to political agendas to shape public perception, to justify extreme actions and create emotional compliance. It's prophetic theater, not prophetic fulfillment. And I'm reading it with clarity because I'm using the Torah as the root. I'm using covenant as the filter, context as the anchor, power analysis as the lens. That's why the fog lifts for me. This is the real-time prophecies, people. Most people have never heard the Torah's actual end-time framework because they've only been fed Christian apocalyptic overlays, Roman eschatology, Greco-Roman symbolism, dispensational timelines, fear-based prophecy industries. None of that is Torah. When you strip away all that and return to the root, the Torah's end times are shockingly simple, covenantal, and consistent. So let's walk through it with precision. The Torah end times, the actual truth. Torah does not describe an antichrist. It does not describe a 7-year tribulation. It does not describe a rapture. It does not describe a one world government. It does not describe a global dictator or a peace treaty, a mark of the beast, a final world empire. None of these exist in Torah. These are Christian overlays, not Hebrew prophecy. Torah's end time framework is built on 4 pillars, and every prophet after Moses simply expands these same 4 themes. So let's break them down. Return to covenant, Deuteronomy chapter 30. The Torah's end time sequence begins with Israel waking up, not the world, not the nations, not the church, but Israel. Torah says Israel will be scattered. Israel will remember who they are. Israel will return to Torah. Yah will gather them. Yah will restore them. This is the foundation of all end time prophecy. The end times begin when the remnant remembers the covenant. That's happening right now. Judgment on the systems, not a supervillain. Deuteronomy chapter 32. Torah does not predict a single evil ruler. Torah predicts the collapse of oppressive systems, plural. Yah judges nations that oppressed Israel, empires that exalted themselves, systems that built themselves on injustice, powers that corrupted the earth. This is not about one man. This is about empire structures. This is why my discernment sees through the Kushner narrative. Torah never centers the end time on a political figure. It centers it on Yah dismantling the systems that harmed his people. Restoration of the land and the people. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 3-5. Torah's end time promise is restoration, not destruction. Yah promises to gather his people, to restore their land, to multiply them, to bless them, to circumcise their hearts, to reestablish covenant order. This is the opposite of Christian apocalyptic doom. Torah's end times are healing, not horror. Yah himself return as king. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 6. Torah end times climax is not rapture. It's not a tribulation. It's not an antichrist. And it's not a world government. The Torah climax is Yah returning to rule his people directly, not through Rome, not through the church, not through political systems, not through an empire, but through himself. This is the restoration of the original order. Yah as king, Israel as his people, Torah as the constitution, the land as the inheritance. Everything else is commentary. The Torah end times in one sentence. The Torah end times are the return of Israel to the covenant, the collapse of oppressive systems, the restoration of the land and the people, and Yah returning as king. That's it. No theatrics, no overlays, no empire theology, no fear-based narratives, just covenant. So why does this matter for you? Because what I'm revealing is not controversial. It's original. I'm not fighting Christianity. I'm restoring Torah. I'm not attacking prophecy. I'm just removing the overlays. I'm not destabilizing people. I'm stabilizing them in the root. And yes, this will create a lot of backlash because I'm dismantling the entire prophetic industry in one move, the move which most are rooted in. But the remnant, they will hear me. They always do. It's going to be those scoffers and mockers that will not hear me. Those who think they are indigenous to the Americas and other lands they claim this is where I originated from. Those are the ones that will not hear me. Shalom.